The bank statement arrived on a Tuesday, tucked inside a plain white envelope that gave nothing away. I almost threw it out with the junk mail. Mark always handled the finances. "You have a creative soul, Grace," he'd say, patting my hand. "Don't worry your pretty head with numbers." For 15 years, I had accepted that as a compliment. I saw it as a sign of his love, his desire to protect me from the harsh, boring realities of the world. Now I see it for what it was. A cage painted to look like a pedestal. I opened it out of simple curiosity. We were saving, meticulously, for my dream. A little sun-drenched cafe with a blue door and mismatched chairs, a place that smelled of cinnamon and fresh bread. We called it the Blue Door Fund. It was our shared secret, our future whispered over dinner and planned on lazy Sunday mornings. The statement was for our joint savings. The Blue Door Fund. I stared at the final balance. $78.14. It felt like a typo. A cruel joke. Just last month, I'd peeked over Mark's shoulder as he did the monthly accounting, and the number had been well over $150,000. The fruit of a decade of careful saving, of skipped vacations and driving older cars. My heart started a frantic, unsteady rhythm against my ribs. I scrolled up the page, my finger tracing the columns of numbers. There it was. A single withdrawal made 2 weeks ago. A wire transfer for $150,000. I didn't recognize the name of the recipient company. It was just a string of letters and numbers. An anonymous void that had swallowed my dream whole. Mark was on a business trip, a last-minute conference in another city. He'd kissed me goodbye at the door, his hand lingering on my cheek. "I'll be back Friday. Hold down the fort." His smile was the same one I'd fallen in love with, the one that always made me feel safe. I called his phone. It went straight to voicemail. "Hey, honey," I began, my voice trembling slightly. "I got a weird statement from the bank. It looks like the savings are gone. It must be some kind of mistake. Call me when you get this." I told myself it was a mistake, a system glitch. Maybe Mark had moved it to a higher interest account and forgotten to tell me. There were 100 rational explanations, and I clung to each one like a life raft. But a cold dread was already seeping into my bones. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, pacing the quiet rooms of our house. Every object seemed to mock me. The framed photo on the mantelpiece of us in front of the Eiffel Tower, a trip we took instead of upgrading our kitchen. The worn-out armchair where we'd sketched out the floor plan for my cafe. These were the artifacts of a shared life. A life built on a foundation I now feared was made of sand. That night, sleep refused to come. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, the silence of the house pressing in on me. I thought about Mark's recent behavior. The late nights at the office he'd blamed on a big project. The way he'd started shielding his phone screen when he texted. The new, expensive cologne he'd started wearing. Each memory was a small, sharp pinprick of doubt. I had ignored them, choosing to trust the man I had loved for half my life. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a message. It wasn't from Mark. It was from an old friend from college, someone I hadn't spoken to in months. Her text was simple. "Thinking of you, Grace. Are you okay?" It was the kindness of it that broke me. I called her, my voice cracking as I told her about the bank account, the confusion, the fear that was coiling in my stomach. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Grace, I think there's something you need to see." A minute later, a picture landed in my message inbox. It was a screenshot from a social media profile. A young woman, maybe 25, with bright blonde hair and a dazzling, self-satisfied smile. Her name was Chloe. In the photo, she was standing in front of a gleaming, silver convertible, a car that cost a fortune. And next to her, holding out the keys with a proud, beaming grin, was my husband. Mark wasn't in another city on a business trip. The location tag on the photo was from a luxury car dealership just 20 minutes from our house. The post was dated 2 weeks ago, the same day the money disappeared. Chloe's caption was a single line, punctuated with a heart emoji. "My baby bought me a baby. Dreams really do come true." The air left my lungs in a single, silent gasp. I dropped the phone as if it had burned my hand. The screen didn't crack, but something inside of me shattered into a million irreparable pieces. The keys. He was handing her the keys. The keys to a car bought with my dreams, with our future, with the money for my blue door. He hadn't just emptied an account. He had taken 15 years of my life, of my trust and my sacrifice, and he had handed it over to someone else. He hadn't just betrayed me, he had erased me. That's when the ground didn't just crack beneath me, it vanished entirely. The next 2 days were a blur of numb disbelief. I didn't eat, I didn't sleep. I just drifted through the house, a ghost in my own life. The silence was a physical weight. Every tick of the grandfather clock in the hall felt like a countdown to a confrontation I didn't know how to have. I replayed the scene in my mind 1,000 times. The look on his face in that photo, it wasn't just happiness. It was pride. He was proud to be giving this other woman the world, a world he had built with my hands. I felt a profound sense of shame, hot and suffocating. How could I have been so blind? All those times he'd called me naive, I'd thought it was an endearment. Now I saw it was a label he had carefully applied, a box he had built to keep me in so I wouldn't look too closely at the locks on the doors. I was the good wife, the supportive partner, the keeper of the home. I had played my part perfectly, while he was living a completely different play. When I heard his key in the lock on Friday evening, my entire body went rigid. He walked in, dropping his briefcase by the door, a tired but contented look on his face. He was humming a little. "Grace, I'm home," he called out, his voice echoing in the still air. I was sitting in the dark in the living room. I didn't move, I just watched his silhouette move through the foyer. "Grace," he said again, a note of confusion in his voice. He flipped on the light. He saw my face then and his smile faltered. I must have looked terrible. My eyes were swollen, my face pale. I hadn't bothered to change out of the sweats I'd been wearing for 2 days. "What's wrong?" he asked, his brow furrowing with practiced concern. "Are you sick?" I didn't answer. I just held up my phone, the screen glowing with the picture of him and Chloe and the silver car. Silence. A thick, suffocating silence hung between us. I watched him process it. The flicker of panic in his eyes quickly masked. The tightening of his jaw. The shift from loving husband to cornered animal. "Grace, it's not what it looks like," he said, his voice low and urgent. It was the most cliché line in the world, and hearing it from his lips felt like another physical blow. "Then what is it, Mark?" I asked, my own voice surprisingly steady. It was a stranger's voice, cold and brittle. "What does it look like to you?" He took a step toward me, his hands held up in a placating gesture. "Look, it's complicated. She's the daughter of a very important client. It was a business thing, a gift to secure a major deal." The lie was so audacious, so insulting to my intelligence, that a bubble of hysterical laughter almost escaped me. The daughter of a client, he actually thought I would buy that. "A business thing?" I repeated, my voice dripping with an iciness I didn't know I possessed. "You secured a deal with our entire life savings. With the Blue Door Fund." I saw the flash of anger in his eyes then. He was angry that I knew, that I'd looked in the one place he'd told me never to worry about. He was angry that I had broken the rules of his game. "You went through the bank statements?" he snapped, dropping the pretense of concern. "I've told you 100 times I handle the finances." "And a good thing I did," I shot back. "Or I never would have known that my dream cafe was just a slush fund for your client relations." He sighed, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of pure frustration. He wasn't sorry. He was annoyed that he'd been caught. "You're being hysterical, Grace," he said, his tone condescending. "You don't understand the kind of pressure I'm under. The world I operate in, that money was an investment. It's going to bring in a return tenfold." An investment in what? Her happiness. That's when the cruelty surfaced. He looked at me, really looked at me then, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Contempt. "Oh, grow up," he sneered. "That stupid little cafe, it was never going to happen. It was a pipe dream, a hobby. I was placating you. This is the real world. I make the money, I make the decisions. You're lucky to have the life you have." Every word was a carefully aimed dart, designed to deflate me, to make me feel small and stupid and ungrateful. And for a moment, it worked. The old Grace, the one who believed in him, the one who trusted him, shriveled under the weight of his scorn. He had never believed in me. He had only tolerated my dream. He had mocked me in his heart for years, all while I was planning our beautiful, shared future. The feeling of isolation was absolute. I was utterly alone in this house, in this marriage, in this life I thought we had built together. He wasn't my partner, he was my keeper, and I had been a fool. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just stood up, my legs feeling like they were made of lead. Get out, I said, the words barely a whisper. What? He scoffed. Don't be ridiculous, this is my house. Our house, I corrected him, finding a sliver of strength from some unknown reserve. And right now, I don't want you in it. Get out. He stared at me, his eyes cold and hard. He saw the resolve in my face, something new and unfamiliar. He must have decided it wasn't a fight worth having right now. With a final, disgusted sigh, he turned, grabbed his briefcase, and walked out the door, slamming it shut behind him. The sound echoed through the house, a definitive, final punctuation mark on 15 years of lies. I stood there in the empty living room for a long time, listening to the silence. It wasn't just the absence of his voice. It was the absence of everything I thought was real. I realized he hadn't just stolen our money. He had stolen my future, and he expected me to thank him for it. The days that followed were the loneliest of my life. Mark sent a few texts, a mix of faux apologies and thinly veiled threats. We need to talk about this like adults. You can't just throw me out, Grace. Don't do anything stupid with the accounts. He didn't mention Chloe. He didn't mention the car. He acted as if the only problem was my irrational reaction. It was classic gaslighting, a tactic he had perfected over the years. He was trying to make me believe that my pain was the problem, not his betrayal. For the first week, I let his words get to me. I stayed in bed, the curtains drawn, the world outside feeling sharp and hostile. I felt like a fragile piece of glass that had been dropped on a concrete floor. Every memory of our life together was a jagged shard, painful to touch. I saw his face everywhere in the photos on the wall, in the indentation his head left on the pillow next to me, in the coffee mug he used every morning. I felt so stupid, so profoundly, deeply stupid. He had excluded me from our own life, and I had let him. I had smiled and accepted his condescension as care. The shame was a physical ache, a heavy cloak I couldn't seem to take off. One afternoon, I forced myself to go online. I looked up Chloe's profile again. It was public, a curated gallery of a perfect life. Expensive dinners, designer clothes, rooftop bars. And there, in several photos, was Mark. Not the tired, serious husband I knew, but a smiling, carefree man I barely recognized. He looked younger, happier. He looked like the man he was with me in our first few years of marriage. The pictures were a series of tiny, brutal revelations. A weekend trip to a beach resort I'd always wanted to visit. A birthday party at a restaurant he'd always told me was overrated. He wasn't just cheating on me, he was living a parallel life, a better life, funded by my sacrifices. The world knew. His friends, his colleagues, they must have all known. I remembered the last company dinner I'd attended with him. The pitying looks from the other wives. The way a few of the younger women had whispered behind their hands when I walked by. At the time, I dismissed it as paranoia. Now, I saw it was the truth. I was a walking joke, and everyone was in on it but me. The isolation was crushing. I had no one to talk to. My parents lived in another country, and I couldn't bear to tell them, to hear the disappointment in their voices. My friends were mostly our friends, couples we saw on weekends. Who could I trust? Who wasn't already on his side? But then something shifted. It happened on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the pile of mail I'd let accumulate. On top was another plain white envelope from the bank. I flinched, my body tensing for another blow. I forced myself to open it. It was just a standard monthly statement for our main checking account. But seeing the official letterhead, the columns of numbers, it sparked something inside me. Not fear, but a cold, clear flicker of anger. He had used numbers to control me, to confuse me, to make me feel inadequate. He had built his kingdom on spreadsheets and bank accounts that he declared off-limits to the creative soul. He thought I was too stupid to understand his world. That night, I made a promise to myself. He would never make me feel small again. I didn't sleep. Instead, I went into his home office, a room I rarely entered. It smelled of him, that new, expensive cologne and old paper. I sat down in his big leather chair and turned on his computer. I didn't know his password, but I tried the name of his first dog. It worked. Another small betrayal. He'd always told me he used a complex, randomized password for security. For hours, I dug. I opened files, read emails, and for the first time, I looked at our finances not as a confusing mess, but as a puzzle I needed to solve. I found folders within folders, accounts I never knew existed. Investments, offshore holdings, a complex web of money that was far more vast than I had ever imagined. He hadn't just been hiding a mistress. He had been hiding an empire. The Blue Door Fund wasn't just a savings account. It was his disposable income, the money he considered play money, because it was the only account I ever looked at. The $150,000 was a drop in the bucket for him. He hadn't just stolen my dream. He had treated it as pocket change. The anger burned away the grief. It was a clean, purifying fire. I wasn't a fragile piece of glass anymore. I was steel being forged. The next morning, I made an appointment. Not with a divorce lawyer, not yet. I found a forensic accountant, a woman named Sarah with a reputation for being a shark in a sensible blazer. I walked into her office with a box of documents I had printed out overnight. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. I told her everything. The cafe, the savings account, the social media post, the computer files. She listened patiently, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she looked at me over the top of her glasses. "He thinks you're a fool," she said, not unkindly. Men like this always do. They build complex systems to hide their money, and they count on their wives being too intimidated or too heartbroken to ever look inside. "Can you help me?" I asked. A slow smile spread across her face. "Mrs. Miller," she said, leaning forward, "I'm going to help you find every single dollar he ever tried to hide from you, and then we're going to get you a very, very good lawyer." That meeting was the turning point, the start of my education. For the next few weeks, I worked with Sarah relentlessly. I learned about shell corporations, about capital gains, about how to trace money through layers of transactions designed to be untraceable. I spent my days in her office and my nights at my own kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of paper, a highlighter in one hand and a cold cup of coffee in the other. Mark continued to text, his tone shifting from annoyed to demanding. "I'm coming by to get my things. You're going to regret this, Grace." I didn't respond to a single one. I was building a fortress of silence, and inside it, I was building an arsenal of facts. One evening, while tracing a series of payments, I came across the name of the car dealership again. The one from Chloe's photo. It wasn't just the one-time payment for the car. There were other, smaller payments made to the same dealership over the past year. It seemed odd. Out of curiosity, I started researching the business. It was a family-owned dealership, one of the last independent luxury sellers in the city, and it was in trouble. A string of local news articles revealed they were struggling with debt and facing pressure from larger automotive conglomerates. The owner, an elderly man named Mr. Thompson, was quietly looking for a buyer to save the business from bankruptcy. An idea started to form in my mind. It was a wild, audacious thought born from the ashes of my old, quiet life. What if revenge wasn't just about taking back what was mine? What if it was about taking control of the very symbol of my humiliation? I thought about the key. The key he so proudly placed in her hand. The key represented his power, his freedom to give and take as he pleased. What if I could own the whole damn building that key came from? The thought was intoxicating. It was more than about money. It was about justice. Poetic justice. I found a document in a folder Mark had cleverly mislabeled household warranties. It was the deed to a small commercial property our family had owned for generations, a piece of land my grandmother had left to me. I had foolishly allowed Mark to manage it, and he had leveraged it for a business loan without my full knowledge. Burying the details in a stack of papers, he'd asked me to sign one busy afternoon. Legally, he had used a joint asset, but morally, he had stolen from my grandmother's legacy. Sarah, the accountant, confirmed it. The property was worth a significant amount, enough to secure my own financing. Enough to make a serious offer. I started a new file on my computer. I labeled it the Silver Lining Project. I learned about business valuations, profit and loss statements, and negotiation tactics. I contacted a commercial real estate lawyer, a quiet, sharp man named Mr. Harrison. He was old school, meticulous, and he saw the steel in my spine that was now fully formed. Together, we drafted an offer. We approached Mr. Thompson through a holding company, keeping my name completely out of it. I wanted to be a ghost until the very last moment. The process took months. Months of tense negotiations, of due diligence, of sleepless nights where I would wake up in a cold sweat, terrified that I was making a huge mistake, that Mark was right, that I was just a naive woman playing a game I didn't understand. But every time the doubt crept in, I would look at that photo of him and Chloe. I would remember the contempt in his eyes as he dismissed my dream. And I would go back to the numbers, my anger focusing into a sharp, diamond-hard resolve. I was not the woman he thought I was. I was not the woman I thought I was. I was someone new, someone being forged in secrecy and spreadsheets. One rainy afternoon, Mr. Harrison called. "The final papers are ready to be signed," he said, his voice calm and professional. "The deal is done. Congratulations, Mrs. Miller. You are now the majority owner of Thompson Premier Motors." I hung up the phone and walked to the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. I didn't feel a triumphant surge of joy. I felt a quiet, profound sense of calm. The world outside was gray and stormy, but inside, for the first time in a long time, everything was still. He had tried to break me. He had taken my past and tried to steal my future. He didn't realize he had given me a new one instead, one I would build myself from the ground up. That's when I understood. Revenge wasn't about destroying him. It was about building myself into someone he could no longer touch. For the next 2 months, I was a ghost owner. I let the existing management continue to run the dealership with only one instruction: alert me if a silver convertible, license plate number memorized and burned into my brain, was ever booked for service. I didn't want to change a thing. The stage had to be set exactly as he remembered it. During this time, I filed for divorce. The petition landed on Mark's desk like a quiet declaration of war. He was furious. He called me, screaming, threatening, accusing. He said I would get nothing, that his lawyers would bury me. I listened to his tirade without saying a word. When he finally ran out of breath, I spoke, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. "All communication will go through my lawyer from now on, Mark. Don't call this number again." Then I hung up. The power shift was palpable. He was used to my tears, my pleas, my emotional reactions. My silence was a language he didn't understand, and it terrified him. His lawyers sent a lowball settlement offer, a pittance designed to insult and intimidate me into submission. My lawyer, Mr. Harrison, simply sent it back with a single sentence written in red ink: "We will see you in court." The waiting was the hardest part. I focused on the dealership from a distance, learning the business, understanding its strengths and weaknesses. I learned about inventory management and service protocols. I was no longer the woman who was afraid of numbers. I was a woman who found stories in them. Then, one Tuesday morning, I got the email I'd been waiting for. The subject line was simple: "Silver convertible service appointment." It was booked under Mark's name for the following Saturday at 10 a.m. first major service. My heart didn't race. It settled into a slow, steady beat. The final act was about to begin. On Saturday morning, I chose my outfit carefully, not a power suit or a revenge dress. I wore simple black trousers, a soft gray sweater, and flat shoes. I wanted to look like myself, but a version of myself he wouldn't recognize. Someone calm, grounded, and utterly unimpressed by him. I put my hair up in a simple twist. I wore no makeup except for a touch of mascara. I wanted him to see my eyes clearly. I arrived at the dealership an hour early. I met with the service manager, a kind, middle-aged man named David whom I had spoken to on the phone but never met in person. I introduced myself quietly as the new owner. His eyes widened in surprise, but he was a professional. "What can I do for you, Mrs. Miller?" he asked. "When Mr. Miller and his guest arrive," I said, my voice even, "please process their service request as you normally would. When it comes time to discuss payment or any issues, simply tell them you need to consult the owner. Then come and get me. I will be in the back office." "Of course," he nodded, understanding that he was being asked to play a part in a drama he didn't fully comprehend. I went into the small, glass-walled office at the back of the showroom and sat down. From there, I could see the entire floor, the gleaming cars arranged like sculptures, the morning light pouring through the massive windows. I didn't feel nervous. I felt ready. I had spent months preparing for this single moment. At precisely 10:05 a.m., the silver convertible pulled up to the service entrance. Mark got out of the driver's side. He was wearing expensive jeans and a casual blazer, trying to look effortlessly wealthy. Chloe emerged from the passenger side, pouting. She was complaining about something, her voice a high, whining pitch that carried across the polished floor. They were arguing. Even from a distance, I could feel the tension between them. The thrill of the affair had clearly worn off, replaced by the mundane reality of two deeply selfish people. Mark strode up to the service desk like he owned the place, tossing the keys onto the counter with a loud clatter. The sound echoed in the quiet showroom. That sound, the jingle of keys, the sound of my betrayal. "Mark Miller," he announced to David, the service manager, "here for the 10 a.m. service on the convertible." He gestured dismissively toward the car. David was perfect. He smiled politely, typed the information into his computer, and maintained a placid, professional demeanor. "Of course, Mr. Miller, we'll just need you to sign the work order here." As Mark scribbled his name, Chloe wandered over, tapping her long, manicured fingernails on the glass counter. "Make sure you get that weird rattling noise checked out," she demanded. "A car this expensive shouldn't be making noises." "We'll certainly take a look, miss," David said smoothly. They waited, Mark checking his phone impatiently, Chloe examining her reflection in the side mirror of a nearby sedan. After a few minutes, David looked up from his computer screen, his brow furrowed with practiced concern. "I'm sorry, Mr. Miller," he said. "There seems to be a flag on this vehicle's account." Mark looked up from his phone, annoyed. "A flag? What does that mean? I paid for this car in full. Cash transfer." He said the words loudly, wanting everyone within earshot to know how rich and powerful he was. "I understand that, sir," David said, his voice still perfectly level. "But the flag is related to the original source of funds. There's a note here. It says the purchase is under financial review. I'm afraid I can't authorize any service until it's cleared up." Mark's face began to flush with red. "Financial review? That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. This is my car. Get your manager. Get the owner. Now." It was the line I had been waiting for, the magic words. David didn't flinch, he just nodded. "Of course, sir. Please wait here. I'll get the owner for you." He turned and walked calmly toward the back office where I was waiting. He caught my eye through the glass and gave me a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. I took a deep breath. I stood up, smoothed down my sweater, and walked out of the office. The sound of my sensible, flat shoes on the polished concrete floor was quiet, but it seemed to cut through the air. Mark was still ranting to Chloe, his back to me. "Can you believe this incompetence? I'll have this place shut down." He trailed off as he saw the expression on Chloe's face change. She was staring at me, her mouth slightly agape. Mark turned around slowly. His eyes met mine. The cascade of emotions on his face was something I will never forget. First, confusion, then shocked recognition, then a dawning, sickening horror as the pieces began to click into place in his mind. "Grace," he whispered, his voice hoarse. What are you doing here?" I stopped a few feet from the counter, keeping the polished marble between us. I gave him a small, placid smile. It held no anger, no triumph, just a quiet, unshakable finality. "Working," I said simply. Then I turned my gaze to David, the manager. "You said Mr. Miller wanted to see the owner." The silence that followed was absolute. Chloe looked back and forth between us, her brow furrowed in utter confusion. Mark's face had gone completely pale. The blood drained from it, leaving behind a waxy, gray mask of disbelief. "You," he stammered. You're the owner." I didn't answer him directly. I looked at the paperwork on the counter, then at David. "The vehicle was purchased using misappropriated marital assets," I stated, my voice clear and steady, loud enough for everyone to hear. "As such, it is a contested item in an ongoing divorce proceeding. It is not to be serviced. It is to be held on this property until the court provides a final ruling on its ownership." I then turned my eyes to Mark. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in them, not anger, not arrogance, pure, undiluted fear. He was finally looking at me and seeing someone he didn't know at all. "You can't do this," he hissed, his voice low and trembling with rage. "I just did," I replied softly. Chloe finally found her voice. "What is she talking about, Mark? What does she mean, marital assets?" Her voice was shrill with panic. Mark ignored her. He was still staring at me, his mind reeling. I reached over the counter and calmly picked up the key to the silver convertible. It felt heavier than I expected. I closed my fingers around the cold metal. "David," I said, not taking my eyes off my husband, "please call a taxi for Mr. Miller and his guest." With that, I turned and walked back toward my office, the key held loosely in my hand. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel the weight of his stare, the burning humiliation, the utter destruction of his world. I realized in that moment, holding the key, that it wasn't about the car anymore. It was about holding the power to turn the lock on a part of my life and walk away. The aftermath was exactly as swift and brutal as my lawyer predicted. The dealership holding the car was the final, undeniable piece of leverage. It was a tangible symbol of Mark's fraud, and it was now, quite literally, my property. His legal team, faced with the mountain of financial evidence I had compiled and the sheer audacity of my countermove, advised him to settle immediately. They knew a court battle would expose him to potential criminal charges for fraud. He was ruined. He had built his identity on the illusion of wealth and power, and I had pulled the curtain back to reveal the pathetic, insecure man behind it. The settlement was overwhelmingly in my favor. I didn't take everything. I just took back what was mine and what my grandmother had intended for me. I took back my future. Chloe, of course, vanished from his life the moment the money dried up. The silver convertible, no longer a symbol of glamour, but of a messy, public divorce, was sold as part of the asset division. I never saw her again. As for the dealership, I had no desire to be a car magnate. That was never the point. I spent 6 months restructuring the business, using the acumen I had fought so hard to learn. I promoted David to general manager, gave the employees better benefits and pay, and made the company solvent and stable. Then, I arranged a meeting with Mr. Thompson, the original owner. I offered to sell my majority stake back to his family for a very reasonable price, structured in a way they could afford. The look of gratitude on the old man's face was worth more than any profit I could have made. I hadn't just bought a business for revenge, I had saved a family's legacy. It felt right. It felt clean. A few months later, I was standing in a dusty, sunlit space downtown. The windows were large, the floors were worn wood, and a small, faded blue door opened onto the street. It was perfect. I used the first portion of my settlement to buy the building outright. No loans, no partners, just me. The day I got the keys from the real estate agent, I stood alone in the empty space. It smelled of old plaster and new possibilities. I ran my hand along the cool wood of the blue door. This was real. I had made it real. The work was hard, but it was joyful. I spent my days covered in paint and sawdust, designing the layout, choosing the furniture, and perfecting my recipes. I didn't hire a big crew. I did much of it myself, with the help of a few trusted craftspeople. Every nail I hammered, every wall I painted, was an act of reclaiming myself. Mark tried to contact me once, about a year after the divorce was finalized. An email appeared in my inbox late one night. It was a long, rambling message full of self-pity and blame. He was sorry, he said, but it was the pressure, the stress. He asked if we could talk, if I could find it in my heart to forgive him. I read the email once, and then I deleted it without replying. Forgiveness was a complex, delicate thing, but I knew one truth: forgiving him was not my responsibility. My responsibility was to myself, to the woman I had become. The Blue Door Cafe opened on a crisp autumn morning. The air was filled with the smell of roasting coffee, baking bread, and a hint of cinnamon. The mismatched chairs were filled with happy customers, and sunlight streamed through the clean windows. I stood behind the counter, my hands covered in flour, a clean white apron tied around my waist, and I watched the people enjoying the space I had built. Not with money he had given me, but with the strength I had found in myself. I stopped waiting for an apology that would never be sincere. Peace, I learned, was not something someone else could give you. It was something you had to build, from the ground up, with your own 2 hands. He thought respect was something you could buy with a car. I learned it was something you build, one quiet promise to yourself at a time. If this story moved you, please take a moment to subscribe. More true-to-life tales of courage, family, and quiet revenge await here. Thank you for listening.